Plato's The Republic, a cornerstone of philosophical thought, presents a profound analysis of societal progression. In this work, Plato meticulously categorizes societies into distinct types, ranging from aristocracy, governed by the virtuous, to tyranny, where power is consolidated in the hands of one. Our video scrutinizes this spectrum, particularly the transition from aristocracy to tyranny, aligning Plato's theoretical model with tangible examples from history. It's crucial to acknowledge, however, that Plato's theoretical sequence doesn't always parallel with the chronological development of real-world societies. While his categories are frequently observed throughout history, the exact order of their emergence may vary. This exploration is aimed at dissecting these societal forms, understanding their inherent characteristics, and identifying the factors that lead to their evolution or devolution. In Plato's seminal work, The Republic, aristocracy is depicted as the most just and ideal form of government. Plato envisions a society where the ruling class, composed of philosopher kings, governs based on wisdom and virtue. This class structure comprises rulers, guardians, and producers, each fulfilling a unique role to maintain harmony and justice. The rulers, equipped with deep knowledge of the good and the just, are tasked with making decisions that benefit the entire state and not just the privileged few. This model of governance, where each social class fulfills its purpose without overreaching, epitomizes political justice in Plato's ideal state. Historical manifestations of aristocracy are seen in various cultures. Notable examples include the Brahmin caste in India, the Spartiates of Sparta, the Eupatridae in Athens, and the patricians in Rome. These societies were characterized by a hereditary ruling class, often established by birthright. In contrast, some aristocracies were non-hereditary, drawing from different societal strata, such as the upper echelons of the Roman Catholic Church or the ruling class in elective republics and monarchies. These aristocracies, though diverse in their formation, shared a common trait of a privileged ruling class, often seen as the most qualified to govern. The concept of aristocracy, as interpreted by Aristotle, another Greek philosopher, emphasizes the rule of the few who are deemed morally and intellectually superior, governing for the benefit of all. This form of governance is distinct from a monarchy where one ruler governs for all, and from a polity where many govern for all. Aristotle's definition underscores the idea that the ruling class in an aristocracy governs in the interest of the entire society and not just for its own benefit. Aristocratic rule can offer several advantages, such as stability and continuity, as leadership is often inherited, creating a sense of tradition and history. Members of the ruling elite, typically raised in privileged environments, are likely to have access to education and resources that prepare them for governance. This can lead to informed decision-making and a sense of order in society. However, these benefits are counterbalanced by significant drawbacks. Aristocracies can often lack representation for the common people, as power resides with a select few. This can result in a lack of accountability and transparency, potential abuses of power, resistance to change, and societal and economic disparities. An aristocracy's reliance on hereditary privilege rather than merit can also lead to societal stagnation. Transitioning from aristocracy, we encounter timocracy, a stage where honor and military strength begin to dominate. In Plato's The Republic, timocracy is identified as the first unjust regime, a departure from the idealized aristocracy. Plato describes timocracy as a state where the ruling class, influenced by a sense of honor and worth, is characterized by a focus on military prowess and physical training. This form of government emerges when aristocracy degenerates, often due to a failure in maintaining the purity of its ruling class. In such a society, leadership shifts towards individuals who are more high-spirited and less intellectually inclined, better suited for warfare than governance. This transition marks a shift in societal values from wisdom and virtue to honor and military success. Historically, the city-state of Sparta is often cited as a real-world model of timocracy. Spartan society was deeply rooted in militaristic values, reflecting the fundamental principles of a timocratic state. In Sparta, the emphasis was on military training and prowess, with less regard for intellectual or artistic pursuits. This focus on martial strength over other forms of excellence is a hallmark of timocratic governance. Another historical example of timocracy is found in ancient Athens under the Solonial constitution in the early 6th century BC. Solon introduced a form of graded oligarchy where political rights and economic responsibilities were allocated based on production capabilities of citizens. This system, where political power was linked with economic contributions, aligns with the timocratic ideal where worth and honor play a central role in governance. The transition from aristocracy to timocracy carries significant implications. It represents a shift in societal priorities and values, from a focus on intellectual and moral virtue to an emphasis on physical strength and martial ability. This change often leads to a more aggressive and less philosophically inclined leadership, potentially paving the way for further degeneration into more unjust forms of government, such as oligarchy and tyranny. The evolution from a society led by the wisest to one driven by honor and military capability reflects a fundamental change in the nature and goals of governance. From timocracy, we see the emergence of oligarchy, defined by the predominance of wealth and property. Oligarchy is presented as a form of government which emerges from the degeneration of timocracy. In an oligarchy, power is primarily held by the wealthy, with political influence tied directly to property and wealth. Plato describes this shift as a transition where the love of money and wealth becomes predominant, altering the constitution to a system where only the affluent have a say in governance. This leads to a division within the city, creating essentially two cities, one for the rich and one for the poor, who are constantly in conflict with each other. Plato criticizes oligarchy for being governed by those unfit to rule and for its inability to unify its people or effectively wage war due to the fear of arming the populace, which is hostile towards the ruling class. In history, oligarchy has often been the result of governing elites recruited exclusively from a ruling caste or class, set apart by factors such as religion, kinship, economic status, or language. Aristotle described oligarchy as a debased form of aristocracy, where power is vested in bad individuals ruling unjustly rather than in the best individuals ruling for the common good. Classic examples of oligarchies often arose where power was concentrated within a hereditary social grouping, exercising power in their own class interest. In contemporary times, despite the spread of democracy, oligarchic structures have persisted in various forms. Countries like Russia post-Soviet Union and China post-capitalism reform in the late 1970s have been identified as oligarchies. Even in democratic nations like the United States, the significant inequality of wealth and income has led some political scientists to argue that it functions as an oligarchy or plutocracy, where economic elites and corporations wield substantial influence over public policy, often overriding the preferences of the majority. The dynamics of oligarchic governance present several challenges. The concentration of power in the hands of a wealthy few often leads to lack of representation for the broader population, creating social and economic divides. The self-interest of the ruling class can result in policies that favor the elites at the expense of the general public, leading to systemic inequalities. Furthermore, the resistance to change and the exclusion of broader participation in governance can result in stagnation and social unrest. Oligarchies, by their nature, tend to prioritize the preservation of the status quo, benefiting the ruling class, often at the cost of societal progress and equality. And then we have the democracy. It is described as a government ruled by the people, or more specifically, by people's desires and appetites. Bear that in mind. In Plato's eyes, democracy arises from the degeneration of oligarchy, marked by an insatiable desire for wealth and the resulting class struggle. The impoverished overthrow the rich, establishing a new constitution where power is distributed equally and positions of power are assigned indiscriminately. This form of government prioritizes freedom and license, often leading to disorder and lack of harmony, as no one occupies appropriate roles. Historically, democracy first appeared in ancient Greek city-states, notably in Athens in the 5th century BCE. The Athenian democracy, particularly under Pericles, is a classic example. It was characterized by direct participation of citizens in decision-making and is often regarded as a model of democratic governance. However, Plato cautioned that democracy could inadvertently pave the way for tyranny. He argued that the very nature of democracy, with its emphasis on freedom and equality, contains inherent contradictions that can lead to its downfall. These contradictions, according to Plato, make democracies vulnerable to demagoguery and the eventual rise of a tyrannical leader. The first road to tyranny in a democracy is through the forceful overthrow of the system by a party advocating tyranny, often unable to gain support in free elections. This situation arises when ideological differences become so stark that dialogue and compromise become impossible, leading to revolutionary violence and the absolute rule of a single party. The transition from democracy to tyranny, in Plato's view, is a natural progression of governance, reflecting the inherent flaws in each system. While democracies value freedom and equality, these principles can be manipulated. This can lead to instability and the eventual rise of a tyrant who capitalizes on these vulnerabilities. This process highlights the delicate balance required in democratic systems to maintain stability and prevent the descent into more oppressive forms of government. And finally, we reach tyranny, where the erosion of balance and justice gives rise to the most severe form of governance, marked by absolute power and oppression. Plato described tyranny as the worst form of government, a complete perversion of the ideal state. Plato views tyrants as lacking reason, the essential faculty for sound judgment. A tyrannical man, and by extension a tyrannical state, is enslaved because it is devoid of reason and order. Plato and Aristotle define a tyrant as someone who rules without law, employing extreme and cruel methods against both their own people and others. This form of governance is characterized by the absence of legal restraint, the usurpation of sovereign power, and the implementation of unjust desires in place of law. Historically, the 20th century witnessed several examples of tyrannical rule. A certain dictator of Germany from 1933 to 1945 is a prominent example. He rose to power through the German electoral system, but soon dismantled the constitution and ruled through force. His regime, marked by atrocities and the initiation of World War II, resulted in millions of people losing their lives. Another example is Joseph Stalin, the Soviet dictator from 1924 to 1953, known for his purges and murderous policies against political opponents, leading to the deaths of millions. The rise of tyranny from less oppressive forms of government often involves a complex interplay of societal, political, and economic factors. In many cases, tyrants ascend to power by exploiting societal divisions, economic crises, or political instability. They might initially present themselves as saviors or reformers, promising to address grievances and restore order. However, once in power, they dismantle democratic institutions, suppress opposition, and establish an authoritarian regime. The transition to tyranny can be gradual, with incremental erosions of freedoms and checks on power. It often involves the manipulation of public sentiment, the use of propaganda, and the creation of a cult of personality around the leader. Tyrannical regimes typically consolidate power by controlling the media, restricting civil liberties, and employing a secret police to instill fear and suppress dissent. The transformation from a democratic or less oppressive government to tyranny underscores the fragility of democratic institutions and the importance of maintaining checks and balances to prevent the concentration of power in the hands of a single individual or group. In our exploration of Plato's depiction of societal evolution, the Republic, we have traversed the spectrum from aristocracy to tyranny, and this has illuminated how each governmental form, with its distinctive attributes and inherent challenges, contributes to the dynamic landscape of political evolution. These transitions, subject to a myriad of influences, underscore the delicate balance within societal frameworks and the surprising ease with which they can transform. This understanding offers us not only a glimpse into historical governance, but also a lens through which we can view and interpret the shifts in our contemporary political environments.